The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Now a man was ill, Lazarus from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who had anointed the Lord with perfumed oil and dried his feet with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was ill. So the sisters sent word to Jesus saying, "Master, the one you love is ill." When Jesus heard this, he said, "This illness is not to end in death, but is for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was ill, he remained for 2 days in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just trying to stone you, and you want to go back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in a day? If one walks during the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks at night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him." He said this, and then told them, "Our friend Lazarus is asleep, but I am going to awaken him." So the disciples said to him, "Master, if he is asleep, he will be saved." But Jesus was talking about his death, while they thought that he meant ordinary sleep. So then Jesus said to them clearly, "Lazarus has died, and I am glad for you that I was not there, that you may believe. Let us go to him." So Thomas, called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go to die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, only about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary sat at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise." Martha said to him, "I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who is coming into the world." When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary secretly, saying, "The teacher is here and is asking for you." As soon as she heard this, she rose quickly and went to him. For Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still where Martha had met him. So when the Jews who were with her in the house comforting her saw Mary get up quickly and go out, they followed her, presuming that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her weeping, he became perturbed and deeply troubled, and said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Sir, come and see." And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man have done something so that this man would not have died?" So Jesus, perturbed again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay across it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the dead man's sister, said to him, "Lord, by now there will be a stench. He has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd here I have said this, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he had said this, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, tied hand and foot with burial bands, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. So Jesus said to them, "Untie him and let him go." Now many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seen what he had done began to believe in him. The Gospel of the Lord. I have been to way too many funerals lately. You know, as a priest, you quickly realize there's really no telling how many funerals are going to come in. You might go a few weeks in a parish and you don't have any funerals. And then all of a sudden a week comes and every day there's a funeral. There's no rhyme or reason to it. The only thing that's absolutely guaranteed is that when Father Bart leaves for vacation, as he did last month, and I'm the only one here to do funerals, all the funerals are going to come in that month. And that was certainly the case last month when he went home to Nigeria. We had so many funerals. There was one week we had 4 funerals in a row. There was another Saturday we had back-to-back big funerals at 9 and 11 a.m. I think I ended up doing 8 masses on that weekend. And, you know, I'm sure you get sick of hearing me sometimes, but try being me and having to listen to yourself 8 times on a weekend. It gets really old after a while, believe me. You know, Martha and Mary must have been thinking, oh, we go to so many funerals, and now here's our brother Lazarus who has died. It all happened so quickly, and it was a whirlwind. I mean, it was great. All the people of Bethany came. We celebrated. We mourned. We prayed. We laughed. We cried. And now what? Now we're left alone in our grief. Martha and Mary sort of retreat into their rather famous personalities in their grief. Martha deals with her grief by being very busy. She goes out, she plans all the details of the funeral lunch, she runs out to meet mourners when they come to the tomb. Mary deals with her grief in a different way. She sits alone quietly at home. She takes things in. She reflects on things in her heart, just as she once sat at the feet of Jesus, listening to him. But now this sitting at home is almost taking the form of a depression. And it's okay. I mean, we all mourn differently. We're all different. And stages of grief change over time. And there's an appointed time for everything. Sometimes there's a time to be quiet like Mary and to just remember the people that we love, to think about them, to be thankful for them, to say a quiet prayer for those that we lost, or to offer a quiet mass for the repose of their soul. And then there are times to speak like Mary did, and to maybe gather friends around for a dinner and remember the person that we lost, or come to our monthly bereavement group, has helped so many parishioners here in the parish to be able to speak about their loved ones who have died. We're all different, but we all mourn, each in our own way. And sometimes it's hard. It's hard to mourn. Where is Jesus in all of this? We're left alone in our grief. Jesus, he's just like Father Bart. He always leaves whenever there's a funeral. Where is he? Martha and Mary seem to be dealing with their grief all by themselves. And funerals are hard enough to go to, but when it's a funeral for someone that's very close to you, like a brother or a spouse or a good friend, it can be heartbreaking. Recently, just things have been quieter in the parish, thank God for funerals. Of course, Father Bart's back, so it makes sense. But now, just when things have been quieter in the parish, things seem to have been picking up for funerals in my own life. And a few weeks ago, Deacon Eric's father, Norman, passed away. And I had gotten to know Norman quite well in the hospital this past year. And when you visit him, he's a great guy. You get to see right away where Deacon Eric gets his warm personality and his sense of humor. Norman was a faithful parishioner over at St. Joseph in Epping, and so we had a wonderful funeral over there. It seemed like the whole town showed up. And Deacon Eric, it must be so difficult to preach at your own father's funeral, but Deacon Eric just gave a wonderful tribute to his father at the funeral mass through much tears and much laughter. I was actually supposed to be traveling that day. I was going to go out to Indiana to visit some of our seminarians, but I found a way to delay my flight into the evening so that I could be there for the funeral, because we want to be there, especially for a good friend like Deacon Eric. And then the next week after that, I found out that a good friend of mine, Henry, from my last parish up north, had passed away. Henry was one of the two men who helped me rebuild the big church, the little church up in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, that had been falling into ruins. And Henry spent about 5 years of his life in that church every day rebuilding it from top to bottom. And for his efforts, he actually was awarded a special medal by Pope Francis called the Pro Ecclesia et Pontificere Medal for the church and for the Pope. It was a special recognition of a service done up above and beyond for the church. And Henry was such a humble guy, he never would have thought of anything like that. And the priest up there called me and told me that they had found him at home. He lived alone, and actually he had probably died a few days before they found him. And he had a lot of health issues, and so I wasn't surprised, but they said, we have to get him in the ground right away. We have to do the burial now, but we're going to have a funeral mass for him. We'll bury him lovingly now, and then maybe this summer we'll go to that church in Bretton Woods that he rebuilt, and we'll have a funeral mass, a celebration of his life. So I very much look forward to that. And then last week, and this is probably the most difficult and personal for me, is that a very good friend and colleague in Becky Vincent passed away. Becky worked in the vocations office in the diocese for many years, and she shepherded countless young men through the application process, through seminary, and into the priesthood here in New Hampshire, and I worked very closely with her. She was an incredibly talented woman, and her death happened so suddenly and quickly. I was working with her right up until the week before. Turned out she had cancer, and she died within a week of finding out. It was just one of the quickest deaths I've ever experienced. And you're left after something like that, say, man, another funeral. And she had a beautiful funeral over at the cathedral last Tuesday in Manchester. I don't want you to think that everyone around me is dying, but it feels that way sometimes. And the grief is real. And for Martha and Mary, the grief was real. It felt like all these people are dying. Our own brother is dying. And it happened so quickly. We were just with him. We just had that wonderful meal with Jesus. It wasn't that long ago. Martha was doing all the serving. Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus. Lazarus was there. We had great. Now Lazarus is gone. And again, where was Jesus? Jesus, we understand, you're busy. You have to go around and preach at all these places. You have work to do. But couldn't you have delayed your trip for at least a couple days so that you could have been here for your friend, at least come to the service? And maybe if you had been here, our brother would not have died. You cured so many people. I think Martha and Mary are going through maybe the anger or the bargaining stage of grief. And then comes acceptance. And now it's too late. We had to get him in the ground right away in this hot country where decomposition happens quickly, almost always within 3 days. Now it's been 4. We've had to do it quickly. Whoever could show up. And it's hard. It's hard. Jesus, you left us alone in this. We had to do it all by ourselves. It's overwhelming sometimes when someone we love dies, and especially if we're not ready for it. And all of a sudden, we're dealing with all these details. Fortunately, Martha's here to worry about it all. But all this planning that needs to get done, and all this expense, and there's just so much, and we weren't really prepared. We didn't make plans. So often that happens. I always feel for families who lose their loved one, and then all of a sudden they're dealing with all this detail in the moment when they can least handle it. Sometimes we're just not ready. So the death of all these friends of mine really have gotten me to think we have to be ready. Some people are ready. It's great. There was a man, his name was Sam. He actually was very ready for his funeral. He had done a lot of planning. He was a planner. He was a Martha. And he actually left $50,000 in his will for an elaborate funeral. And after the funeral was all over, and the last mourner had left the funeral luncheon, His wife Rose was sitting there, and she sat down with her oldest friend Sadie, and she said, "You know what? Sam would have been pleased with that." And Sadie said, "Yes, I'm sure, dear, he would." "Tell me," said Sadie, "how much did that funeral cost?" "All of it," said Rose. $50,000. "No," said Sadie. "All that, it was very nice, but that's $50,000. "Yes," said Rose. "I spent $5,000 for the funeral director, and I gave $1,000 to the priest who celebrated the funeral." This must be a joke. This never happens. "And then $2,000 for all the food and drink, and then I spent the rest on his memorial stone." Sadie did the math in her head. "Wait a minute, you're telling me you spent $42,000 on a memorial stone? How big was this stone?" "Well," said Rose, "it was about 7.5 carats, I think." We're never quite ready for these things, but death is a reality. We all mourn, each in our own way. And Jesus, when he finally shows up, he has the audacity to say, "Show me where you laid him." Well, okay, roll away the stone. Lazarus had been sealed in a tomb. This great big fat stone had been laid in front. Roll it away. "What is this, a joke, Jesus? What are you talking about?" And Jesus looks around and he sees all this emotion. He sees all these people weeping all around him, laughing, it says he becomes perturbed in his spirit. And in the famous shortest verse in the Bible, it says, "And Jesus wept." But why did he weep? Well, he wept because in his humanity, he was also mourning the death of his friend Lazarus. Jesus mourned for his friend. But he also wept because he saw all the unbelief of the people around him. It had disturbed him. How many miracles did he have to perform before people had faith? And it's not that it's bad to cry or to have strong emotions. It's very good to mourn. It's very good to cry. It's very good to go through all this, but we don't mourn like those who have no hope. We believe in the resurrection. Roll away the stone, Jesus says. There's a lot of laughing and crying around here, but this is not a joke. This is not a funeral. This is a resurrection. Lazarus, come out. Do we believe that our loved ones will hear that same call of Jesus one day? That we will hear that call one day to come out of our tombs? "O my people, I will open your graves and have you rise from them." Do we believe that our loved ones will hear that call? "Norman, come out. Henry, come out. Becky, come out." Do we feel the call of Jesus, the invitation to come out of our own tombs of our own making, the tomb of unbelief, the tomb of a lack of hope, the tomb of sin, the tomb of darkness, depression, so many tombs that we're in? Jesus is calling us to come out into the light. Next week, we'll commemorate the death of another man, the man Jesus Christ. During Holy Week, we'll remember that last week of his life. But Holy Week is not a funeral. It's a celebration of a life. It's a celebration of a resurrection. Because we know that that road, as difficult as it is, the way of the cross, and as dark as it gets, and it gets dark, it gets sad, especially on Good Friday. But it's not that sad, because we know where the road leads. It leads to Easter. And on Easter, the stone was rolled away forever. Jesus purchased that stone at a great price, the price of his own life. And it was rolled away, and all the light came streaming into the tomb. Jesus invites us to walk out into the light. He invites us into the fullness of life. He doesn't want our loved ones and us just to return to ordinary life here on earth that leads to death. He wants us to experience new life, life to the full, life that has no end. That's what I died for you to achieve. That's what I rose again from the dead so that you could share in. Do you believe this?